sometimes you tend to get used to privileges or that you're given because they're always there, but it's not by chance that we're here. And as we said yesterday, everybody has a purpose. They are there to fulfill. And I'll just pick on that same note and look at a Bible character. And then again, as we finish, uh, each story. Remember when you used to be young and I used to read the Bible, and sometimes I used to wonder about the Israelites, and I used to wonder what type of people were this, always uh, wavering between God and always shifting, yes, positions, and yet there's a clear, um, it was clearly visible. It should have been clear anyway to them that God was Almighty because of the many times they would wonder, I want to be like their neighbors. Then, and then they get to trouble, then they pray to God and God delivers them. And just showing that when God gives you a purpose, because they had a purpose on earth as Israelites, they had a huge purpose. It's just that I think they lost focus of that huge purpose. The reason why they were different was for them to be blessed. And if you understand that concept, it makes a whole lot of difference. And but the goodness of God is that He didn't just want His chosen people to be blessed, but He just wanted to show everybody who was going astray that His way is a way of blessing, and He's yearning, yes, to bless each one of us. So I want to use the story of Jonah again, showing the purpose that each one has for us, and we should not run away from it, but we should be glad when chosen. Should be like Isaiah saying, "Here I am, Lord, Lord, send me." So I'll use an example of Jonah because that might be an example that befits many of us, maybe, when it comes to our calling for God's work. Remember, when we are socialized, a lot of times from when we are young, we're always told this is career. And unfortunately, because most mindsets are going towards the Western model, yes, it's more of I make it in the world, I do it, I do well, I have a big house, I have a big car, and then that's it. Yes. But we saw yesterday that there's a bigger vision because our life here on earth is so little compared to eternity. And so, just like a visionary would do, you don't focus on the troubles in the little time of discomfort of travel that you have as you are advancing to a greater goal, but you always set your eyes on the greater goal. And remember, yesterday we used the analogy, even school, high school here, boarding school. Yeah. Sometimes I remember when we were in high school, you'd even, when you open school, you write on this is not very good, but anyway, sometimes you write on the wall. You enter school, it's about 3 months before you go home. So you start writing uh, 90 days uh, to, to closing day. You're actually starting to count down because I mean, it's necessary for you to be there to learn, to help you in the next stage in life. But the encounter there, as I said, sometimes used to be uncomfortable, and many people would drop out, especially in Form 2 and Form 3. But when you think about the concepts of now, if I drop out now, then what do I do? What can I do? The things that you do are very limited. But if you just happen to just extend that discomfort for another year or two, then doors just open and it's a totally new world. It's totally new. There are so many opportunities for so much good. That's with us from God also. But when you think about this life here, just as high school only, and that there are greater things for us to aim for, then we'll not only think about the temporal issues, which God sorts anyway, but we'll think about the actual purpose that God has for us. So we've got the story of Jonah. Jonah, from Amittai, wasn't, um, we know the book of Jonah very well, but that wasn't his only prophetic work that he had done prior to getting to Nineveh. He had done other things. So he was a renowned. He was known to be a man of God, number one. But even sometimes when you're doing God's work, again, sometimes you get into a comfort zone. This is easy. This is my point whereby people applaud me. This is a place whereby I am known. This is a place whereby everything I say happens. A prophet, yes, it can get to your head. But God had a difficult task, As far as Jonah is concerned, it's a difficult task because he's been ministering in Israel. Those are his people. They know him. Um, Success, and I'm saying success in terms of when he said something, because it was from God, it would happen. So he's taken to, I'm saying this because when you know his story in even Jonah towards the end, one of the reasons he's angry when God's mercy is shown on the Ninevites is because he said, I knew that you're a gracious God. So he's thinking about his tarnished career in terms of he prophesied something in his mind, and it didn't happen. Yes, he said they'd be burned or they'd be destroyed, um, but it didn't happen. And yet, it was actually there's a condition. God actually was sending him not so that the Ninevites would be destroyed, but so that they'd be saved. So in his mind, it was like a failure. So when he's discussing with God, actually arguing, debating with God, and just that also just goes to show about how merciful God is. Yeah, you argue with God. He could easily just take your life if he wanted to, but he gives you time to actually vent whatever it is, the misgivings that you have. So anyone, Jonah had success in Israel, but now God is sending him to a foreign country, and going to a foreign country is very uncomfortable. Yes. Even if it's to what we call greener pastures. The first time, even if you're moving, let's say from Africa or wherever to the West, where people generally agree that you're going to greener pastures. It's a culture shock. There are differences. It can become overwhelming. Even when you're making it, there are differences, especially if you grew in a different setup and you're in a different setup. But usually, because the thought of supposedly it's a better place, you can overcome those discomforts. Now, him is going to a place whereby the people are renowned for huge atrocities. It's like going, I don't know what I'd compare it with. Maybe going to a war-torn country. Yes, where sometimes if they pick you up, they tear you into pieces. But it's God who's telling him to go. And unfortunately, again, because of man's narrow focus, he tries to run away from God, which is impossible. You can't run because the psalmist actually says, even if I go to the depths, which happened to Jonah, there you are with me. There is nowhere you can run. So it is very unfortunate that in Jonah's mind he could run away from God. Remember, he's not a heathen. He's not someone who doesn't know God. He's someone who has worked for God previously. So fear of the unknown, um, fear of discomfort. And remember, we're talking about Jonah, think of yourself. Don't think of it as I was saying when I was young. I used to think, what is Israelites doing? Very stubborn people. And yet, sometimes even us as individuals tend to be stubborn. Sometimes we think it's something small in your mindset. Because Jonah probably when he was running is thinking, there are so many people in Israel. God can find someone else. God can even go and talk in a dream to the king of Nineveh. I mean, he had talked to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was not a God-fearing man. He had talked to Nebuchadnezzar in dreams. Why not? I don't have to be the one going there, feeling uneasy. Give me a better task. I'm fine where I am. So he runs away. And someone is just trying to draw an analogy of how his run was. The trip that he would have taken, trip, long enough but not deep. But when he took a boat to go to Tarshish, it was three, was it 4 or 5 times the distance? So he's spending more money, yes, and he wasted not only his finances, because of course it probably cost more to go to where he was running to than where he should have gone, number one, but it costs other people's money or wealth because of running away from God. And it's important for us to know this. When you're in God's purpose, you're not the only one blessed. You're the most blessed, by the way, yes, but you're not the only one blessed. Think of Joseph, even in difficult situations, but everywhere he was, whoever was around him was being blessed, even when they still did not know God. And if you think about the bigger picture that God had for him or to work through him, it was through his work that he was going to save the whole world during a famine. So think of that big picture. God was sending him, but the initial parts of his journey were some great discomfort. But the greater thing that he was looking at was salvation for everybody, including the Egyptians. Yeah. And of course, greater salvation, there was a whole plan of salvation in that whole scenario. Yeah. So now Jonah would have thought like that because he knew stories of Joseph. He knew the stories of so many people prior to him. But he's just thinking about himself and his comfort zone and the success he's already had. And he's thinking of, oh my, oh, the Ninevites. And I think there's a lot of prejudice also. And that also happens sometimes when God sends you somewhere. You think He should have a better task for you to do. You think that the calling that He has for you is demeaning. There's someone else who can do it. And yet, if you think about the bigger picture, that task that Jonah was sent to do, just like for Joseph, or just like for Moses, or just like for Christ Himself, who came and was killed here on earth, was a greater good. And in fact, it would have been his greatest success story. He just didn't know the end from the beginning. But in his running away, he brings, as I said, a lot of discomfort for other people. Yeah? And if you think about even his mindset, it it was actually God trying also to reveal the state of his heart because he was probably feeling fine. I mean, I do God's work, but he had a lot of prejudice. And he actually didn't care about other people who are dying. Uh, for him, he was saved. Why I say that, when he was in the ship, he knows that he's the one that in trouble. And if you would have been in right lines with God, you probably would have been maybe on, on top of the ship instead of going to the very, very bottom to hide. Probably would have maybe divulged even to the ship, the guys in the ship who God was. He eventually did in a negative way, yeah? But he hides. And then there's a storm. And I always think, surely, if you've been on a ship or a ferry or a seafaring vessel, when the waters are turbulent, you feel it. You actually feel it. Yes? So for him to feign sleepiness, it was like a child who doesn't want to be woken up. He knows, but he's pretending to sleep because this boat was shaking. This boat was nearing disaster. That they are throwing things out. Surely this man would have heard, but he hides so that no one finds him, and he knows he should have come out forth outright that this problem is because of me. Yes, but people lose their wealth. Yes, imagine if your suitcase was the one that was thrown out, whatever it is, maybe you are traveling and you had carried, or whatever it is you are taking for, maybe you're in trade, so you've taken some merchandise, but because of saving life, because of Jonah, whose presence should have been blessing you because he's aligned to God, but his presence, because he was working contrary to God, was causing even problems amongst those around him. So that scenario, just think about yourself. If you're running away from what God wants you to do, what harm might you be doing? You should have been a source of blessing, but you become a source of curse. And I dare say that those people had a Christ-like heart more than Jonah, because whereas before he was found out, he was willing for this ship to even capsize. That's how 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 narrow his mind had become. He was waiting. I mean, if they hadn't decided to use whatever tactics they did to get the source of the problem, because they themselves could see this is not just the sea being boisterous, this is a spiritual matter. They could see people who don't know God, and he was found out. And then he actually blurted that he was the one who was the problem. But even when he says he's the problem maker, people try to save his life. They cannot see themselves throwing Jonah into a boisterous sea. If they themselves are at the point of death while they're still at least afloat, imagine they tried so hard, yes, to save him, and yet he wouldn't have condescended to do the same for them. Yes. In fact, that's why he was in that boat. He didn't want people to get saved because of the discomfort, initial discomfort he would have had. Maybe he thought the Ninevites would call him down. probably kill him, or etc., etc., etc. But if you think about how the story ends, as I said earlier, it was his greatest success story in ministry. Of all the ministers who have been written in the Bible, there is no success story like Jonah's. Yes. Think about Noah, who builds an ark for 120 years and only gets away with his own children and his wife. Yes. And Noah, after just preaching for a very, not even a week, everybody gets saved. Yes, God's spirit was in that. God was seeing these people's hearts and they were errant because of ignorance, no one to guide them. And you can think about that if anybody has ever ministered with maybe delinquents or young children or juveniles who maybe get into trouble, and you may be saying this child is difficult or this child is bad, if you can use that word for lack of a better term, you realize that some people have not had the opportunity to be guided in light. They were born in, we're told everybody's born in iniquity, but they're born in a situation where even the evil is the norm. So they've never known that there's a better way. But once they are guided with patience, they become the best success story. And that's what Jonah didn't know. So even for us, where you think it's uncomfortable, where you think, no, someone else can do it. I mean, there are many millions of billions of people here. Someone else can generally do it. But it was you that God had chosen to be able to do that uncomfortable task. And the discomfort was at the beginning because if, and again, it's also because of just wrong perception. Because Jonah, as soon as he enters into Nineveh, starts talking, and immediately hearts are turned right from the king, who probably would have been the most difficult to convince. And he sets the whole nation to go into a fast. And they plead to God, and a whole nation is saved. And you see how what joy, we're always told what joy it is in heaven when just one person turns back to God. Yes. So imagine what party was in heaven on that day when a whole nation, even God Himself explained to Jonah when he gets angry, why should I not be merciful to these people who did not know left or right? He understands that their wrongdoing was coming from the aspect of they did not know. Yes, they were doing it because that's how they were raised. Yeah. And he even cared for even the animals, let alone the people. So the greatest success story becomes done, so to speak, because of Noah's perception, which could be any of our perceptions. God has a very important plan for whatever else you have been doing that is important in saving many people. Because if you think about the other uh, time Jonah was doing some work, it was just prophesying in his own country. People already know God. He's just encouraging them. But this was such a success story. And the success was not only in the fact that the Ninevites were converted. Think about all the miracles that happened. Of course, they happened because of his distrust in God and disobedience initially. But a story like you being swallowed by a fish and staying in that tummy for 3 days, I know that's an exciting Bible story. Yeah, for a long time, when especially my boys when they're younger, that's a story they'll tell you. Tell me the story of Jonah. And the story of Jonah. It's so exciting. Yeah, it might even seem mythical. Yes. So many things, and God basically takes care of his transport. Remember, I told you when he was running away, um, the distance he was going was multiple times that he should have been going before. And the whale, the big fish, puts him at the right place. So a story that is exciting. But because Jonah was still, even despite the fact that he actually went to Nineveh, his heart was still hard because he expected, oh my, in his mindset, his career path was everything he says the prophet will be done. Yes, not knowing that sometimes God sends prophets not for distraction, yeah, but actually to save souls. It could have been if they could probably have been destroyed if they didn't convert, but it was a greater success story, not in the prophecy being fulfilled, although it was fulfilled because it was actually saying, if you do not, this will happen. Yeah. And there's actually success in what Jonah thought as maybe was a failure. So anyway, using that Jonah story again to reflect on ourselves, what is God giving us to do that is making us uncomfortable? And yet when we refuse to do it, one, we get into trouble ourselves. Two, we hide from God, and that can lead to spiritual death, literal spiritual death. If that boat had capsized with Jonah in the water, mm, think for yourself and finish. Yes, but but when he when he reveals himself and who he is, so many people get saved. Even the shipfarers, the vessel owners, they actually also get to know the Almighty God because of the great miracle. So in doing aligning ourselves with God's work, yes, a lot of people get benefit, a lot. And you and remember, you're the greatest beneficiary anyway. And the contrary is also true. Wherever you may be running away, you will be working so hard, yes, but God will make that boat stall. Yeah, that boat, the Jonah's boat could go nowhere and it could have sunk anyway. And will bring in systems that are more difficult for you to get you on the right track. But if you're on the right track as far as God's vision is concerned, um, uh, then be a lot of good all around. So may God help us to understand our bigger picture, not focus like worldlings on the narrow picture and blow that out. Yes, nowadays I see like in our country when people are going to be elected, they declare their wealth. People say I'm worth this many billions, and now that's what people are aspiring for. I want to have this many assets. I want that is so small in God's mindset, so small because the greater picture is the work that you're doing for him. And those assets, if perchance God has given them to you, um, since you can't use them all anyway, yes, one person cannot use them. You will probably just have to put them in a bank somewhere so people can see that you're worth this amount. But the worthiness of whatever God has blessed you with is supposed to be seen in again the bigger picture. How many know God? In a world with almost 8 billion people, there's a lot of work to do. And even if you cannot go to the end of the world, you can work. There's an influence that God has around you, and you just need to align yourself with that. So may God bless us this morning with that story. Um, and may He just encourage us to do the right thing. Let's just finish with one story. I mean, just an analogy on that. Again, I'll use a story of my own family members. Around COVID time, uh, our son was not here. He was in a foreign country, and it was easier to be in Africa than anywhere else. So we came, and that's just about the time he'd done eighth grade, so he's going to ninth grade. And so there's a transition from and this is just Jonah's story also about Jonah's almost like I mean oh, God's purpose. So he is a transition from an American system, which has its challenges, but believe you me, if you've been in an African system and the Kenyan system specifically, it has a lot of pressure. Or like the Asian systems, they have a lot of it makes American system and British system makes it easy. I know that for a fact because I've done American system, I've done British system exams and I've done Kenyan system exams, and there's a whole lot of difference. When I was doing the Kenyan system, you really have to work hard to keep up. And I remember when I went to do exams for a British system, I didn't even have to revise. Yes, it was much easier, much easier. So it's one thing, as I say, challenge coming from a Kenyan system and going to an American system or a Western system, and it's another whole ball game moving from an American system and coming to Kenyan system. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of pressure. Yes, like I was saying yesterday, now they have exams. It is you feel it's tense. It's tense for the students, tense for the parents, tense for the teachers. It's tense. Yeah, and so anyway, so he came here and so he joined this Kenyan system. And I remember oh, the first term, and he entered late. And there are many challenges, apart from the fact that even the measurement systems are different. Here we use metric, in the US they use yards and whatever. So even conversions, you just have to, there's so many things you have to adjust to, having to adjust to language like Swahili. He knows Swahili, but now doing it as a subject, having to adjust to African history. There are so many things you have to adjust to, and then our system is harder generally. And I remember the second term was like, and at that time we actually had some other children we were helping to take care of from Ethiopia, and one of them ran away from school. Yeah, I mean, our system is difficult. Yeah, ran away and refused to go back. So and they're in the same school with our son. So our son, when he came for a break, he said, if I had the guts, I would have run away with her. Yeah, that's how it felt. But I thank God for many things, including the principal who understood children. He just didn't, yeah, he understood children. He allowed him time off anytime he felt like going home. In fact, even the relative said, getting wine and saying, "This child is always home. What is he going to learn?" But understanding the psychological aspect helped a lot just to anchor him. So long story short, I remember now he's going now for term for his what we call Form 2, which is grade 10. And he says a prayer. And we usually train missionaries also at home. So he says a prayer that God would help. He removed his mindset from the fact that he's in school to learn, which is important, not just causing him a lot of distress, because he was adjusting and there's a lot of competition. But he said, God, let me be a light because I'm born to missionary parents. Let me be a light where I go. And that was a mind changer, a game changer for him, because that second term, that second year he started, he goes to school and he's elected, not elected, yeah, he's chosen, nominated as what we call prefect here, but his prefectship was the spiritual leader. I remember when he came home for half time that day, he was more excited for a number of things. In being the spiritual leader, also, he didn't have to stand in line when he's going for his meals. He didn't have to do certain duties. Now he had to be responsible. I mean, it had other burdens or responsibilities, but that, I guess, made his life easier. Also, his temporal life was made easier. But what made me happy was he himself said, my prayer was answered. He's been spiritual leader in Form 2, Form 3, Form 4, 3 years straight. Yeah. And this last year, as he was going for his final, yeah, he's there doing exams, he said he actually was using Daniel as an example, that God sent him there because he's from a missionary family and he's been a missionary there. And um, um, that's not his life purpose, but because school is only 4 years, I mean, high school is only 4 years, but it made me think about the bigger purpose. He's in school years, and in school, you usually think about, okay, your career path, and let me think about that too. But the fact that he himself could say that God answered my prayer, that I could be able to direct people. And if you're in Kenya, you know many things happen in Kenyan schools. There is Illuminati, there is LGBT, there are many things. And sometimes he tells me the stories there, and he just says he and some of his friends, before beyond their normal required duties to go and they have to go to church every day, but they would just go when he's closed, because the spiritual leader is the one who locks the church, and opens the doors. They go, the first time he'd go, one friend, two friends, three friends, four friends, five friends, and they just have prayer together. Yes, they just have prayer together. And that, I mean, just that blessed me so much, such that I remember, like last year, his father was saying, anyway, things are now easy. Corona is not a problem anymore. We can go back and you finish where you started. And he himself, a place where he initially said, I would have run away, said, no, no, I'll finish here. I will finish here. Yes, because of the work, the spiritual aspect. And I remember when during their prayer day, we usually have prayer days, their math teacher told him that the work, and I was so glad. In a competitive uh, sphere that we have in our setup as far as education is concerned, his math teacher talked about the aspect, the spiritual aspect. Yeah, the purpose, the greater purpose that he is fulfilling in helping to draw souls and helping himself. He's also young. I mean, he's also learning. But he said that because the math teacher is also the elder of the church, and said the work you've done for God, yes, is a very important. Never forget that part. And I was so glad that he pointed that out, other than his math grades or his whatever, which are also important. But that aspect of putting in even children's mind that purpose for God, as uncomfortable as it may be, and I know it was uncomfortable for him, very uncomfortable, but that he was able to see the bigger picture that God had for him, and it has helped in his spiritual growth also. So I'm just saying that to just draw that analogy for us where we are. Let us not run away from our purpose. Yeah, my son almost ran away. Yes, Jonah ran away, but God will disturb you until you're back there. And always remember that the success story that God has for you when you're in His plan will sort the temporal issues. Yeah, but the bigger picture of many being blessed through you is a legacy that will live for eternity. So may God bless us as we contemplate this. Let's finish the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your encouragement today. Continue to show us, if we do not know, our bigger picture, so that we just don't align with the way the world puts things, but we align with you, because we have a great work for you for to do for you while you have placed us here on earth. Be with us for those of us who are going to sleep, for those of us who are starting off their day, and guide and protect us. For it's in Christ's name I pray and believe. Amen.